Welcome to Global Voices, the official podcast of the Center for Socially Engaged Theatre at the University of Regina.
So with that, I'd like to say welcome. Welcome to another talk on that focuses on Saskatchewan, our own very own province. It's really exciting to be able to have the opportunity to just do some dive into the creative sector, particularly those organizations that are kind of driving that in us in our province. My name is Tawa Folabi, and then we're dialing in today from Treaty 4, the homeland of the Anishinaabe, Dakota, Lakota, and Nakota, and the homeland of the Métis and Métis Nations. So welcome. Today we have two amazing, lovely people who are lovely to me, amazing people that I know them very well, because we've done a lot of things on different capacities and different shapes and different ways. And so today we're going to be hearing from Breanne Harmon, the Executive Director of Persephone Theatre, and of course Jennifer Brewin, Artistic Director of the Globe Theatre. The vision of the series, we started last month, January to May, is to really feature organizations within the creative sector, we call it the Creative Saskatchewan, to hear from the creatives. And we're focusing particularly on organizations because we know that these organizations play an amazing role in the ecosystem. Both of them and others that we've invited and that we're still going to see, incredible work on trying to figure out how would this thing work, whether it's within the budget cuts that we constantly experience, or in trying to build the ecosystem with artists, seasons, and all of those things, even capital project that we know that the Globe Theatre just came out from, and of course Persephone Theatre, 50 years. Like both of you, your organizations are really doing remarkable things. But also, most importantly for me, is the fact that, but for both of you, and of course I know that the artistic director of Persephone is not here, but both organizations, I think that you're really committed to really developing the ecosystem, and by that specifically, I mean really encouraging emerging artists. I know the amount of sweat and work that Jennifer you put into that, and same as Breanne, we do art leadership training program together. Like I know the amount of work that both organizations are putting into that. So from the artist perspective, but also from finding ways to support emerging organizations, companies. So kudos to that. And so today we're going to start with Breanne, who originally, she's from Richmond, British Columbia, and now she resides on Treaty 6 territory in Saskatoon. Breanne is the Executive Director at Persephone Theatre in Saskatoon and was previously the General Manager at Green Thumb Theatre in Vancouver. Prior to her roles in executive leadership, Breanne was the Tour and Education Manager at Green Thumb Theatre and the Production Manager at Presentation House Theatre in North Vancouver, and worked as a professional stage manager for a decade. She sits on the board of Professional Association of Canadian Theatres, PACT, as advocacy co-chair, and was the Region 3 caucus and Theatre for Young Audience caucus co-chair prior to that. She has sat on numerous labor relations committees, including the Canadian Theatre Agreement, CTA, and Playwright Guilds of Canada. She's a graduate with honor from the University of British Columbia with a Bachelor of Fine Arts in Theatre Production and Design, where she was the recipient of the Norman Young Scholarship for Theatre and the Dean of Arts Scholarship, while also completing the Fine Art program in Visual Arts at Langara College. She's a founding member of the Rising Tides Open Door program and has been a co-coordinator of the National Art Leadership Training Program since 2021. It's good to have you, Breanne. And Breanne's going to be kind of talking today around building and maintaining authentic relationships with stakeholders. And she'll just do that for 15 minutes, and then we'll pass it on to Jennifer. And I would quickly also do just intro for Jennifer, and then both of you can have it back to back, and then we go into Q&A. Jennifer Brewin, she was the co-artistic director of Toronto's Common Boots Theatre, British Columbia's Caravan Farm Theatre, and for 3 years served as artistic associate at the National Arts Centre in Ottawa. She has directed for many theatres across the country, including Prairie Theatre Exchange and the Great Canadian Theatre Company, the National Arts Centre, the Blythe Festival, Caravan Farm Theatre, Grintham Theatre, Thousand Islands Playhouse, Festival Players, and Factory Theatre. She has collaborated with many of Canada's fine playwrights, directing the premieres of works by Kajori Chan, George F. Walker, Michelle Ream, Natasha Greenbelt, Martha Rose, and Haley McGee, to mention a few. She's currently the artistic director of the Globe Theatre. Jennifer has created large-scale outdoor work for the Caravan Farm Theatre, the National Arts Centre at Dowes Lake, and the Central Experimental Firm, the Canadian National Vimy Memorial in France, and for 6 years she led large teams to bring outdoor winter theatre to Toronto audience at Evergreen Brick Woods and Christie Pitt Park. As a writer, she has co-authored a number of collective creations, including The Election, Scading, The Public Servant, The Attic, The Peers, and Three Fine Girls, all for Common Boots Theatre. With Peter Hinton, she created the Frost Fair for the NSC English Theatre, and for the Caravan Farm Theatre, she wrote 2 outdoor winter productions and contributed to the writing of 3 outdoor musicals for the summer seasons. She's the recipient of a Dora Marver Moore Award, Toronto, a Jesse Richardson Award, Vancouver, and with Estelle Shook, the Armstrong Award of Excellence. And in 2020, she moved to Regina with her husband, Arthur, and their 2 dogs. She's a proud step-granny and devoted auntie to many. They are very happy they moved here. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to both of you. And then again, our structure is we just have you give an overview, and then we go into Q&A. And the last thing I would say is that part of our own role as a research center is the gathering space where we bring, practitioners and artists together. And at some point, we go into writing and creating stuff. But we want to start with this to be able to create that space to have this conversation. So over to you, Breanne, and then we'll go to Jennifer. So thank you again.
Thank you so much, Taiwo, and hello, everybody. As Taiwo said, I'm Breanne Harmon. I'm the Executive Director at Persephone Theatre, right here in Saskatoon on Treaty 6, and it's lovely to see some faces and some screens. I'll share a little bit about Persephone Theatre, and then as Taiwo said, I'll dig in a little bit more to stakeholder engagement and relationship maintenance and all that fun stuff. So Persephone Theatre is a not-for-profit charitable organization which relies on public and private funders to support its work. Founded in 1974, so having just celebrated our 50th season, Persephone Theatre began its journey through humble beginnings at the Mendel Art Gallery and has blossomed into the largest professional theatre in Saskatoon and the largest employer of theatre in the city and the only fully accessible arts and culture space in the city and one of 2 regional theatres serving the province, the second being Globe Theatre. Now residing in the downtown core at the Ramey Art Centre at River Landing, which has been Persephone's permanent home for close to 2 decades. Now in its 51st season, Persephone Theatre has been a cornerstone of Saskatoon's cultural landscape, enriching our community, reflecting our stories, and our community values. Each season, Persephone Theatre offers a robust offering of programming, sharing up to 6 plays on the Ralco Radio Hall main stage series and up to 3 plays in our youth series, including a youth tour that goes directly into schools in the province. The variety of work on our stages is vast, ranging from Broadway-style musicals to classic works to brand new homegrown plays made right here in Saskatoon, including the world premiere of our 50th season's hit, 18 Jews Order Chinese Food by local playwright Jenna J.B. Berenbaum, the 2020 hit Reasonable Doubt by Yvette Nolan, Joel Birnbaum, and Lancelot Knight, and its inaugural production of more than 50 years ago now, Cruel Tears by Ken Mitchell, which is what really put Persephone on the map. Much of the work we do at Persephone is in service to the community, and we take great pride in championing local talent, be that actors, designers, playwrights, administrators, and Persephone in Saskatoon is so often the starting place which catapults local talent into strong artistic and administrative careers. In addition, we are strongly committed to serving the people of Saskatoon through numerous community engagement programs, including our ever-popular theatre school programming, which sees more than 800 youth through our doors each year. Through First Monday, in partnership with Some Theatre, Mac is here from Some Theatre, and that is a partnership that we've been going for about 3 years now, I think our 4th year, which offers free stage readings of new Saskatchewan plays. And hopefully, if you're out in Saskatoon, you'll be able to experience that. They're really incredible, incredible nights. We have our artist mentorship program, which is a paid training program for emerging artists to work alongside a professional in their field of choice. And as Taiwo mentioned, our participation as co-coordinator in the Arts Leadership Training Program, which is with CSET and Belfry Theatre, now in its fourth cohort, as well as the PAC-supported Rising Tides initiative, along with many other free community initiatives like the David Edney Community Borrowing Library or Pomegranate Gallery that features work of local artists throughout the season and community pop-up markets and so much more. While we primarily serve Saskatoon and its surrounding area, we also attract patrons from 114 communities in our province, welcoming more than 50,000 patrons through our main stage and youth programming. We're currently underway on a large capital campaign to replace Persephone's roof. The campaign is a $2 million venture with close to 80% of the funds either in place or pending funding results. In order to raise these funds, genuine relationships with funders, community members, and philanthropists need to be formed. And this all begins with laying a foundation of trust. So much of what we do in the arts is relational. Whether it's fundraising for a large campaign or bringing in new exciting play for our audiences, engaging with new artistic collaborators, it all starts with relationships, and relationships start with trust. It's very easy to look at an end goal, like a $2 million campaign, for example, and have no idea where to start. Today, we're going to explore what cultivating trust-based, authentic reciprocal relationships look like with stakeholders, whether that's a donor, community member, a city councillor, an artist, a collaborator, beginning with the initial meeting and extending far beyond the individual project or goal. We'll be focusing on real-life examples, strategies for listening with intention, values alignment, and goal setting, and clear communications. Oftentimes, the biggest and most challenging part of relationship building is where do I even start? If you have an ask, may it be a fundraising or a project collaboration, knowing where to start can be difficult and sometimes very daunting. Do you go for the ask right away? Do you take your time? Do you send an email? Do you make a phone call? The lead up can be endless and can often result in procrastination, leading to delaying the project start altogether. I like to look at these communications in a stepped approach, allowing myself the time to prepare and make things go smoothly and really take things one step at a time. I always start with conversation. I do my research on the individual or the company I'm looking to engage with. I find common interest, values alignment, and always come first to the conversation with an open mind and genuine interest. In the age of digital communication, it can be really easy and definitely less pressure to communicate solely by email. Email is a great tool to make an initial introduction, but I will never start my email introduction with an ask, and I will never start by sharing collateral ahead of getting to know the stakeholder. I always start with an invitation to connect, first in person if that's an available option. If that's not an available option, then by phone or virtual meeting. When appropriate, I extend an invite to a behind-the-scenes tour of Persephone Theatre. That's not always available as some folks work remotely. And I also share what the conversation is about. So for example, for sponsorship or donations, I share that I'm looking to deepen the relationship through partnership or sponsorship. I tell them what the meeting will be about, so there are no surprises, but I do not include the ask. And I also do not include any collateral or any or fundraising documentation ahead of the first meeting. Once I've secured the meeting, I take the time to know who I'm meeting with. I do preliminary research, and I really ensure I understand their philosophy or their brand, whether it's an individual or an organization, to be able to bring clarity to the conversation. For me, clarity is definitely key. Preparing for a first meeting can also be daunting. Depending on the nature of the meeting, it may just be myself, or it could be myself and a colleague or a board member or another member of the community or a collaborator. I always ensure I create space for dialogue ahead of diving into the goal. I do not like to rush the first meeting, so I often recommend giving yourself time to ensure there is time and that this time is clearly communicated. I typically book first meetings for 1 hour. If there's a tour involved, I'll increase that to an hour and a half. Real relationships begin with trust, and trust begins with that foundation, and that takes time. I have built relationships with funders, philanthropists, and sponsors that have started with a getting to know you coffee, often with no initial ask, that have then resulted in sizable donations or gifts. The best piece of advice I was given by a philanthropist when I first arrived in Saskatoon was people want to be asked. You can invest time into your relationship building, skirting around the topic request. You can wine and dine, collaborators, donors, supporters, stakeholders. But if you don't ask for what you need, you may never actually get what you're looking for. The worst you can be told is no. And I think it's a really important reminder that it's okay to be told no, but making the ask is that first step. And now on to the tricky part. You won't always know when to make the ask. And the first few times you do it, it may be very uncomfortable. And that's okay, and that's normal. When you lay a foundation of trust and getting to know each other on a professional and a human level, the ask or the goal becomes much easier. Just as important as the ask is listening, and listening with intention, ensuring that you're coming to a conversation with an open mind and an appetite for knowledge and genuine interest in the needs or desires of the person or the company that you're engaging with. Now, what do you do once the ask has been made? For me, I always follow up with an email outlining the conversation, sharing collateral related to the project or the ask. Even if you shared a physical copy, sharing it digitally is also of great benefit. And I also will tell the person who I'm meeting with or the organization, I'll be following up with an email so they know what to expect. Next, I set a mutually agreed upon time to reconnect. So it's great to follow up, but I always have when we're going to connect next and find a mutually agreed upon time. For supporters who may not be familiar with you or your theater, I often love to extend an invite to participate, whether that be through attendance at a show if we have something on, or a venue or a space tour, or even a link to digital work if that's all I have available at the time. Inviting them into the work and the environment will keep them interested even after the initial meeting or ask has been laid out. So the ask goes well, the project is now underway. What do you do with the donor or the stakeholder? Do you stop the communication and only reach out again to the donor or the artist or the collaborator when you need something with them again? No. You keep the communication open. As an example, there have been 2 significant individual donors to Persephone's capital campaign for the roof, as well as granting support. I keep regular communication with both donors, as well as the funding bodies, sharing updates as they arrive, and we'll keep them in the loop about project milestones, timelines, successes, even barriers or delays. My win is their win, and that's how I see it. These communications can be a simple email update, some project photos if you have them available, even a coffee or a phone call. Just something to keep those touch points going. I also like to keep the communications open with donors for future partnerships once the current project is complete. Chances are you're going to have more success going back to a donor who has supported you once or twice than finding new donors and new supporters every time. There's usually a really good values alignment, which allows you and enables you to grow the project and to grow that relationship. Ultimately, outreach and relationship building is not one size fits all. Each relationship is unique, just like each project is unique. And the same strategies used for one stakeholder may not work for another or may significantly differ from another. The important thing is to remember that above all, you are people first. Approaching potential stakeholders like donors, sponsors, project partners, collaborators, and artists begins with 2 people making a connection. Once that foundation of trust and relationship building has begun, the next steps become much more fluid. Don't get me wrong, I still get nervous when I'm approaching a new donor or a new partner. Even in the last couple of days, there's still anxiety and nerves around it, entering into a new relationship every time. But it's part of the work that many of us do as arts and culture workers. And I know it's part of the work that I personally love. Meeting people and investing in and stewarding authentic and long-term relationships built on trust, mutual respect, and shared values is a big perk I see of the work that I do, and I feel very fortunate that I get to do this in Saskatoon. Sharing my passion for the arts and culture is exciting, and I love to bring people along for the ride. All right, thank you. I'm going to pass it on to Jennifer to talk about something completely different.
That was so awesome. That was so perfect, and I agree with everything you just said. Um, no, it's such a great overview of the work that gets to be done. And I start so many of my conversations as an artistic director and producing in the term relationships. And in the rehearsal room, it's about relationships. And it doesn't mean we have to all get along with each other. It's not that. It's it's recognizing that that's what's happening. And the more we speak to each other as authentically as possible, the more what we do remains a human thing. And the values that we all aspire to and the reasons we're in it get to live fully in that place. And so if we can live with those terms and get our board to and all our organizational institutional structures to think that way, and recognize that's what fuels HR, that's what fuels marketing and finance decisions. I think it's a good thing to keep in mind because so I love that. So thank you. So I'm here to talk about how to program a season. And I'm opening it all up. And I kind of leapt at this opportunity because um, it's an interesting question because we all sort of know what goes into our own hearts and souls when we choose a season. But the reality is we work with a lot of criteria and we work with a lot of ideas. And when I wrote that every time I do a pitch to the board on a new season, I'm like, I've actually started giving them all the criteria that influences the choices for a season. So a couple things about the Globe Theatre. We share so many things with Persephone in terms of what our responsibilities and our duties and our goals are. We're a large theater, and we're I think it's over 5 million this year. So that's a lot of money. And there are good things that go along with that, as well as particular and unique headaches. And I recognize boohoo, call the ambulance, because like boohoo, you've got too much money. But there's responsibilities in artistic practice that I love that comes with it and what we can offer artists as a result of that. So I wrote down some questions in my thing. Is like, how do you program a season? What goes into it? What's the relationship between creative ambition and commercial reality? How does location shape programming? And how do the prairies and those things. So let me just haul up my notes here. Another thing about season programming is, so we're talking about next season. Before we started this, Breanne and I had a conversation. Persephone's about to announce their season, and we're not announcing ours till April. And I have a lot of envy of starting it early because it gives much more lead time to get everyone excited about it. And there's a lot that goes into the announcement of it, and we can talk about that if anyone's curious later. So all that I think about when I start programming a season, I think of the time slots. I think about the range of work that we're going to offer and engage with. So there's a lot of criteria. So starting off with, so let me say it this way. I start writing down a list of shows that I like, that I'm interested in, that I think people are going to be interested in. And then I start figuring out how they fit in the season and the size and the shape of the season, how it's going to offer a range of work, both for audiences. And I'm an audience member too. We're all audiences as well. But what will entertain people, what will compel people, but also what will inspire artists, what will inspire people to like where they live. So then I ask everybody to weigh these choices. And by everybody, I mean staff and our board who get to approve it and buy into it first, is to look at it through the criteria that we are all living with, formally or informally. So informally, we have our mission statement. And of course, I put them all up. And so our mission is so broad, but it's kind of helpful. Our mission is to entertain, educate, and engage in the art of professional theater by producing high quality performances, providing theater education, and being a valuable part of the community. So professional theater, education, and community. What's nice about those very, very broad ideas is each generation of artists can interpret it how they'd like to, but it keeps us remembering that we're professional and every generation has to understand, define for themselves what professional means. We're in a new world, and there's a great invitation to ask that. What is theater education, and what is being a part of the community? So that's our direct mission that our bylaws go by. Following that up, we have, let me just see if I've got the right thing here. Yeah. There's a kind of vision that was handed to me that I've went, I'm going to keep that. I like it. And that is that we become recognized as significant. These are lofty terms and they drive me a little bit crazy, as a national and international center for, but this is what I do like, that we're recognized that we're the production of theater in the round, because for some of you, you may not know, our theater's in the round, so it creates its own unique opportunities. Theater education, and again, being part of the community. Now, here's where the fun part starts to come in. That's our mission and mandate. Almost anything can fall into those categories. But what starts to happen is you go, what's happening right now in the world that people want to see? And the second is, what's the criteria from arts councils? So when I look at our revenue sources, we get 50% is in box office, I would say. Another 25% is because we're a nonprofit charity, and another 25% is in funding. I don't even know if that's entirely right, but that's how I think about it. The reason I like pulling up, even though 25% is government funding, I think it's a bit more than that. Even though that's only a portion of it, I speak about it all the time and advocate for that criteria of Arts Council funding, is because not only does it represent what Arts Council funds, it represents what artists believe and how artists approach what we do. So when I want to get money for the company, I also want to attract interest and artistic curiosity by the artists across this country, but across the province, this region, this city. So I look for things that show up in Arts Council funding. I like artistic integrity, audience engagement, financial viability, operational capacity, relevance, timeliness, diversity, inclusivity, equity, collaborations and partnerships, educational outreach opportunities, and of course, how it aligns with our core vision and mission. So I've just listed off so far probably about 15 different criteria to do all this. And I haven't even included what our company and even our board all says what we actually like, is when we talk about what our purpose is. And this was drafted, and again, I grabbed it. And we talk about how we engage and inspire our community through artistic excellence and good shows, how we reflect the diversity of our community on stage and throughout the organization, how we provide a gathering place to promote the exchange of ideas and experiences, how we contribute to the economic vitality of downtown Regina that really is craving it, and how we develop lasting community relationships. Okay, so those are 20 criteria that come into play. So these are all floating around in my own brain. And then, of course, I have my own biases, the biases that I see that come into this community, and tastes. So the next step is something about me. Taiwo has spoken to this I put my timer on. Taiwo spoke about it in a little bit, but my roots come from collective creation, devised theater, outdoor theater, the new Canadian play. I came of age when you couldn't even get funding for a commercial theater didn't exist. That came in the 90s. There was some, of course, but not really. Commercial theater didn't exist. Funding, they would not support theaters that did not do Canadian work, and that's changed. So I came from that. I come as a director, a writer, a producer. I also want to speak a little bit that comes into it is my political upbringing. I came up in a very left-wing family. They were elected. They ran for politics. Our Christmases were demonstrating for the rights of South Africa and apartheid. So I just thought that's what I was going to do. And I had to spend a lot of my early 20s figuring out what the relationship of political action, social changes, and storytelling and art. And so it's taken me a while, but that's also a big part of how I approach EDI work in it. But I have sort of two philosophers, three really, that help. I guess all these things about criteria and ideas hopefully show up in the choices we make, and we'll get to that in a split second. But for me, there's a Israeli writer, Amos Oz, who is one of my favorite writers, who speaks, has sought change before he passed away, of course, but sought change in his own country. And he is a novelist and a playwright, but was also a public speaker and a public thinker. And he wrote in this chapter once, he said, "When I know right from wrong, I get on a pedestal, I get on a news broadcast, I speak out loudly. But when it's gray, then I know I'm ripe for a story." And I've always loved that because that guides me in what I think my job is as a theater maker, is to show off the messy gray of the in-between. Noah Harari also speaks to that. If you want to know what's interesting, look at what an institution says it is and what an institution does. And that middle place is where the yummy stuff is. Again, these are all where it's how I feel theater plays a role in social change in the public square. So that's me, my taste. I like comedy. I came from clown work. So that has its own kind of embedded dramaturgy that I like. But ultimately, I like stories about the collective and the individual and how hard it is to just live on this earth with each other. So I kind of look for plays that show that off. And, after another few years of being here, people will want an artistic director with a different kind of drive for it. But for now, that's what I kind of dig into. And you'll see that in the work that I've done in the past and how I think it's a never-ending area of investigation. I think about our communities. We're a regional theater. What does that mean? Who are our neighbors? Who are our neighbors in town? Is there something that neighbors can like and come to gather around? What's this place? What are those things we share? It's Sask, Regina is a place where rural and urban existence lives very closely together. It's a hard town. It's got wealth and poverty that are in stark relief. There are no soft edges to it. It's a place of sunshine and cold, freezing cold. So there's some qualities that I think about in this place too. And then finally, I think about what's happening now. And I think we're living in a world of tremendous disruption and uncertainty, and it keeps going in fear and fascism and those things. So I think of the story of myself, the individual, the story of us, and the story of now. And I'll speak to that. That actually comes from a social justice activist, Marshall Gantz, who speaks to public narrative and how it shows up in storytelling. Okay, that's it. The next thing in the last 2 minutes is I'm going to speak to the next thing specifically is a range of form and content, musicals, comedies, the well-made play, classical plays, the contemporary Canadian play, the contemporary international play. So all of those things all start to show up in how we program the season. I look for things that are both fresh and familiar, original and nostalgic. These contradictions, smart and popular. I look for things that have an intergenerational appeal. That's it. I have envy for what we're building up to because we just were closed for 5 years. And so we're catching up to where Persephone's at in terms of really amplifying our theater school, theater for young audiences, curating the black box in an indie second space. So these are all on my mind, and we're all building up as we also consider organizational capacity so we all don't burn out, cry, and don't serve anyone well. That's my general thoughts. So I pass it over to the people.
Well, thank you so much, Jennifer and Breanne, and I think both of you are, I'm just thinking of right now the 4th cohort for Art Leadership Training Program, the national program. They're in Ottawa right now, and I'm thinking we might need to keep this video and then, play to another cohort because both of you have given us a very rich, complex, robust overview of the role of an AD and ED, and those are constant conversations that we always have, especially in this current ethos where things are changing. How do you select a play in this with all the complexities that you talked about, Jennifer? Like, You have to think about the creative ambition and the commercial reality, right? Or for Brie, how do you nurture a relationship, for a capital campaign and different things like that. And also both of you have been able to kind of offer us insight into the values that guide your work. And I think for me, that's the big piece of it is, those values that guide the work that you do. So, audience are allowed to ask questions. Please put it in the chat. And while folks are thinking about that, I think one of the questions I love to ask both of you, because when we look at the ecosystem here in Saskatchewan, the two theater companies are sort of like what we've got. Within in terms of level of budget, expenditures, the number of artists that you that you take every year, the works and things like that. What do you see of the future as we think about as Saskatchewan continue to change? Jennifer, you were talking about the Globe just getting to the just open the new space in downtown. Breanne, the same thing over there. You didn't just open it, but also you're getting into another capital campaign and a lot of new theaters and new artists that are springing forth and all that. How do you think this is gonna? How do you envision the ecosystem and the role that your organizations can play? And I'll add another subtext to that. When we think about the university and the training systems we have, we continue to churn out artists all the time, and we also want to retain them in here because retention, part of the Future Prairie Theatre project really teaches us or we discover, maybe not, it's not necessarily discovery, that retention is a big thing here. So I guess the question for Persephone Theatre and Globe Theatre for both of you is, within the ecosystem, how might you be able to, based on all that you've discussed today and the vision of the future, how can you work that into the vision of the future within the ecosystem in Saskatchewan? It's a big question, but
Breanne, I'll take this one first and then we'll switch it up. Saskatoon is really fortunate because it has more than one sort of regularly operating theater company, with Shakespeare in Saskatchewan, 25th, Five a Lot. There's a number of theaters and activities going on, as well as the university. And Regina didn't have that. It does have that, but it's sort of in spite of what the Globe's done and in spite of itself, because I think the Globe fell short of nurturing that community up until now. And they may have done it for good reasons, like who knows what it is to feed the beast. But there's certainly an appetite now in our organization, and I sort of talk about it all the time, that we are constantly in connection and in relationship with every other performing arts group that's going on in town. With anything around public life, we're in connection to it. So for our marketing team, for everybody, we are, how does the Globe show up as maybe we lead things with our main stage programming? How do we partner, and how do we champion what else is happening? So that means our marketing team is showing off what other people are doing. That's just right off the bat. We change our attitude, going, what's ours is theirs. Whatever we can share, we share. The second thing is, we look for, how does the University of Regina show up in our work? How do local artists show up in the work? And what opportunities what are the legacy projects for every show we do? How can it show up for something else and inspire something else? So I'd say we're aware of it, with both formal and informal attention to how our local community can be supported. Persephone and I, like in the Globe, we did joint auditions at some point. How do we open up that highway between the two things? I think about all the time, like our first choices we hired from Regina, and Saskatoon is our sister city. So how can we support that? We just had a conversation with Shakespeare in the Saskatchewan, going, how can we support their audiences while we're running in June, because we're before them, so we can help promote them. Because anything we can do to build an appetite for theater. And what I love about Regina is, because theater people didn't there weren't as many other theater companies. We've got Curtain Raisers, Deaf Crows, Listen to This, On Cue, of course. But it means we have interdisciplinary artists. We have people who are breaching forms and creating new forms. And that's the cool payoff that it's happened in the city. Breanne, I'll pass it over to you.
Thanks, Jennifer. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of crossover, as Jennifer said, in the work that our two companies do, both being regional theaters and being the only two in the province. In addition to what Jennifer has shared, some other things that as we look at kind of bolstering arts and culture in the province and what's going to look like in the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years is looking at visibility and reach. I'm not from here originally, and I moved here. I've been here for 4 seasons now. And when I moved here, I had the naive assumption that, okay, Persephone is the only regional theater in the city. Obviously, like 80% of the population will know what Persephone is. And I was led, I was led to believe that was the truth. And when I got here, it was a definite culture shock. Being in the city and people going, why did you move here? And I'll say, oh, I moved for a job at Persephone Theatre. And I'll either get a blank stare or is that a movie theater? What is that? And then I'll say, oh, it's actually, it's been here for almost 50 years. It's theater in River Landing. And I'll get met with, I thought that was the art gallery. So there are so many things about visibility and just getting out there and getting in front of people. And so there's a lot of opportunity, and we've really seized a lot of that opportunity and doing that in partnership. So we're not siloed, not doing it as an individual organization. As I mentioned, we have a partnership with Some Theatre. Mac Dawson is the AD over at Some, and we've been doing the First Mondays. And we are currently doing our general auditions in partnership with Shakespeare in Saskatchewan coming up. Any opportunity to partner with another company. We currently have a show in rehearsal going up in the next week and a half, Rubaboo, a Métis Cabaret, in partnership with Gordon Tatusis Nagano Theatre, as well as Royal Manitoba Theatre Centre in Winnipeg. So I think that a lot of that drive is really going to be greater visibility in our own cities, in our own provinces, but also nationally to make our theaters and our arts and culture spaces more of a destination. You don't just go there because you live there, you travel there, you make a point and an effort to build your vacations, build your planning around the program that's happening at Globe, happening at Some, happening at Persephone and Shakespeare. Another piece too is we're experiencing a really large growth in our population. There's a really large contingent of newcomers in the city, and the city is just growing and growing, and new neighborhoods are forming, and it's really exciting. And so being able to engage with new communities, so folks who are new to the city or new to the country, and inviting people in a way that is relational, that is real, that is authentic, making our home their home. And that's, with the Saskatoon community, but also with the artists in the community, really investing in the artists through mentorship opportunities. Because ultimately, to be in a world-class city, you need to have strong arts and culture. That's what makes a city world-class. And I think that Regina and Saskatoon are very fortunate that we do have robust arts and culture. And so it's our responsibility as theater makers to ensure that this continues and grows. And as Jennifer said, boo-hoo, they have too much money, but that's a great problem to have because the more support you have, the more you can do, the farther you can push, the greater you can reach.
Well, thanks to both of you. I know there's a question. I'll go on to that. I also want to say that I think that Saskatchewan we're notoriously humble province. We don't tell our stories. And those that try to tell it, there's repercussion. It's like you're too arrogant, and you want to blow your own horn and all of that. And I think that's maybe something to even think about is how can we start telling these stories, right? Beyond the all the theater companies, 25th Avenue, Shakespeare in Saskatchewan and all that, they may not reach that $5 million budget, but they're doing remarkable things. Same thing as Regina Little Theatre and different things like that. How do we How do we tell that story? I'm just going to put that. It's not a question to both of you. It's it's just a question we need to constantly think about, because I think a lot is happening. A lot is happening, but telling the story becomes very great. That's how we can change the narrative of Saskatchewan as a rural place where the only thing you see there's just bushes and weed feed and all that. And I've had we had a invited I mean, at the center I get to bring a lot of people internationally. And 2 years ago somebody came from London, and she was flying from the US, and the person was like, where are you going to? And they're like, Saskatchewan. My goodness, they don't have anything there. You're just gonna see and she was like, she was baffled to, anyway. Mark has a question here. So my point is storytelling. How do we tell that story for the world to know, to be able to change the narrative? Mark's question here, it's about seasons and programming. How do you navigate tension and resistance from audiences to engage with plays that challenge and subvert their worldview? In bracket, building an appetite for unfamiliar art/topics. So I mean that might go to Jennifer, and of course Breanne from an ED perspective and the business of the art perspective. You might want to chime in, but I'll pass it to Jennifer.
Well, I'll leave it to Breanne to discuss the conversations I've had with only a handful of board members who have said we may need to put EDI work off for a while we get our audiences back. And I said, that's how we get our audiences back. And there's the numbers to prove it. So that just moved that off the table, but Breanne can speak to that for sure. So first of all, the audiences are us. I am the audience. They're not separate from me. They're my neighbors, they're my friends, they're my relatives, they're my racist uncle, they're my super activist lefty, intolerant lefty cousin. Like they're everybody. So first of all, I am the audience, my neighbor's my audience. So they're not, I think we keep thinking of them that way. Second, somebody said to me once, how much of your audience is holding, and I'll use this term, but holding your programming hostage? And if it's 20% who are saying you can only do like white Christian work, then you might want to get, and if it's not your mandate to do that, then you may want to get a different 20%. So I think about that a lot, and I actually am approaching it that way. The next thing is I'm not educating anybody. I'm trying to show off a story on stage. Like when I get back to that messy, muddy middle, that's what I focus on. I think our job is to actually show off the messy, messy middle of trying to talk to each other. Otherwise, I'm getting on a soapbox and I'm writing an essay and I'm getting out there. Not all shows are like that. Sometimes it is specifically for that. But generally, I'm not educating anybody, but illuminating, yeah. Showing off the world that I hope it is, showing off the world that I see it, and maybe that's pooched. But what I do is we bake it in to the work. So Steel Magnolias, you're probably going, how on earth can you be political about this old chestnut? So first of all, I chose that play because I was at Regina Little Theater and I went, you know what? And I looked at that audience and it was packed and they were old and they were one skin color in there and probably one cultural thing. But you know what? They all love theater. And I went, I'm just going to give them something a little light, like just find that one old chestnut. But we don't have to deliver it as an old chestnut. We don't have to counter do it. So we cast it with really interesting people, and we cast it with people who came from different cultural things. And I got Estelle Shook to direct it, who does outdoor theater. She doesn't do the well-made play. So I found people who were forced to find a fresh approach to it, and that was going to make it alive. But my secret thing about Steel Magnolias is that I think rural Saskatchewan is not needs some help to be encouraged to be a bit more progressive. And somebody once said to me, if we got the women together, that's where the change is going to happen. And so Steel Magnolias for me was a little bit about where's that third space that women gather and what can happen there. So that's just a little example. The other thing is, if you've seen Frozen, we have a non-binary princess, Elsa. And it's clear they're non-binary. So we kind of embed it in how the casting is, how we approach the telling of the story. So we're shifting our understanding of it. We're shifting our expectations of it. Not entirely, but just to go, most stories have something important to say in it. Most of the good ones, the old chestnuts. And so how do you kind of grab onto that? Frozen is, and I'm not heavy-handed about it, but I can live with Frozen because it's about sisterhood. It's about women in public life. It's leadership. And it's also a folk story, a folk tale, and we all get that. So I kind of butter it all up into one thing that people can't help themselves but go to, and then see a version of the world that might be not exactly like they expect. And so I'm trying to encourage us to shift the dial a little bit. And then finally, how do we build an appetite for a variety of theater? That's what I keep doing. The more I can get people through the door and shifting it a little bit. I'm not shifting it hard, but a little bit. And we've had emails, we've had terrible things come back to us, and we are all in alignment, including the board, that they can go to a different theater for if we're not the ones. So we're getting rid of our 20% who are mean. And that's different than people objecting to it or having good conversations about what's wrong. It's very different. So those are, is there anything else in that? Yep. I'd say that's all I'll say on that matter.
Thanks. Breanne, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, again, in a very similar position, we have a lot of patrons of a certain age. Many of whom are actually starting to age out of being able to attend the theater. Many of whom some of our patrons have been with us for the full 51 years and are very passionate and deeply embedded in what theater means. And so, we have done work that some of our less progressive audience members or the more long-standing patrons have objected to. And the way that we've approached that is by having open dialogue, open conversation, making myself, our AD, accessible for conversation, arming our box office team with the understanding of what kind of conversations we want to have. Similar to Jennifer, we did go through a period, this started before I arrived, of receiving a lot of anonymous feedback in the form of letters with no return address, with no names, typed out, sharing dismay in the types of work that we were doing, feeling the work was too political, it wasn't entertaining enough. And so we have put in a process of collecting feedback from our patrons. Because sometimes the feedback surprises us, and we allow folks to put anonymous feedback in, or they can leave information for follow-up. And these have been going out for the last couple of seasons after our shows. And we collect a lot of information. Every survey is slightly different. Of course, how did you enjoy the show? It's about the show, but also about the experience at the theater. Like, what was your experience from an accessibility lens? If you had access needs, were they met? Were they not? Questions about our new ticketing system. So there's a lot of other things that we embed. And we also want to know, what do you want to see? What excites you? What entices you? What are we not doing that you want? Or what are we doing that you want more of? And the answer is always musicals. Musicals, musicals, musicals. And I know Jennifer can attest to that as well. And musicals, while amazing, cost a lot of money. And so there's that balance of giving a lot of our patrons, possibly 75% of our patrons, what they want versus sharing something new. And we have really good open conversations with our board and our staff about that as well, about pushing the needle in terms of comfort, in terms of different styles of work that might challenge, work that might on the surface feel that some of our patrons will be resistant. And for us, it's a stepped approach. We don't want to go too far, too fast, because we've had that experience where we've done shows where people have revolted and not come. And so for us, and I think it's similar for a lot of companies, it's a learning process. Every time we try something new, it invites new challenges, but also opens the door for more opportunities. And the biggest thing, our takeaway and my takeaway really is how to engage with our audiences. We're not looking to alienate audiences. We're looking to work with our audiences, engage, grow, bring new people in. And the beauty of a full season of plays is that you have a variety that you can share. When I speak to patrons and they're like, I wasn't really a fan of that play, I go, that's fine. Like, what did you think about it? And we talk about it. I'm never offended if a patron says, I didn't like that show, because oftentimes it's not the show, it's not the production. Say, I really didn't like the show, but the actors were amazing. The stage was amazing. Oh my gosh, the composition, the music was amazing. The design was amazing. And I go, well, what didn't you like? They're like, well, I don't really like the story. And you go, okay, great. That's great. We can talk about this. And so I think, for us, being, I guess I said myself, our AD, being accessible and available for conversation to talk through it. Because sometimes when a patron says, I want to be entertained, they don't mean they want comedies all the time and only comedies or only musicals. Um, they also, from our experiences, have learned that entertainment is also challenging. It's just what kind of challenge are they looking for?
Thank you so much. We There are two other questions here. Thanks for your response, Jennifer and Brian. Um, this is by Kate Cushion, and thanks, Kate, for coming, for attending again. We really appreciate you being part of what we do at the center. Kate was part of the Festival of Arts and Discourse, and Kate has been coming to our stuff, so really appreciate you. I'll try to read this quickly. This discussion is so interesting to me. I'm a librarian at the University of Regina, and my subject areas include theater and business. So hearing from folks involved in the business of theater is really cool. I'm also the librarian for English literature, and I keep thinking about the rich history of theater in terms of patronage, embeddedness in society, and relation to land/location. This is sort of a philosophical question, but do either of you see resonance with the long history of theater in your work that is very much looking to the present moment and to the future? And any of you can respond to that.
Well, one of the things I love about Saskatchewan is its that I connected to is its theater history was built on collective creations and devised theater. It was the paper wheat. It was stories about farmers in the collection. And so I think about that a lot. And I think it's going to be that sense of history and that idea of connecting to land will somehow probably answer your question a bit, Mac, too, is like when we start showing off new plays that they've never heard of, but the subject matter is something they understand, then people can gather around it. We did a play, Number 34, about George Reed. Everyone in Regina knows what Number 34 means. No one talked about it as a new play. We didn't go, oh, we are doing a new play. You guys have to come and love a new play. We did a show with Munish Sharma, whose family moved from Pakistan in the 70s, who fell in love with football as a way to be in the community. So Number 34 was his way. Judy Wenzel was directing it. She came from Collective Creation. So the history of the place and how it shows up in the work, I think, is critical to a season. I think it's an excellent question, Kate, and I think it's an excellent thing to follow. But the roots are here, where we talked about ourselves. When I programmed Master Plan, my secret dream was for it to inspire people to start writing plays about Regina in the same way Michael Healy was writing about Toronto.
The only thing I'll add is just to really acknowledge and celebrate the past, present, and what's coming in the future. We recently celebrated our 50th anniversary, and part of our celebration was a social media campaign where we highlighted 50 milestones and moments from 50 years. So it was 50 weeks of the year. We had 2 weeks off over the holidays. The rest we had, and it was really focusing on the people, whether that was the founders of the organization, past leadership, but also patrons. We had some patrons who literally had 45 years of our playbills, of our programs in a library in their home. And so being able to showcase what Persephone and what arts in Saskatoon and in the province means to the people is just embedding those roots and celebrating those roots. And so, yeah, I say similar to Jennifer, just the work is there, the passion is there, the roots are in the ground. And so just continuing on that legacy and not being afraid to reflect to what got us started.
What makes me laugh about being here is how somebody's still mad that Ken Kramer produced a Jean-Luc Godard play in 1979, and they're still mad at us. Like
People in Saskatchewan are so passionate patrons, I find. Like, as I've said, not from here, and I've experienced a whole new level of passion, which is also really, it's fun and it's exciting. But I found that the patrons here, for Persephone, I can speak for, care so deeply that yes, they're going to hold a 40-year grudge because they didn't like something that was produced 40 years ago. They're still going to come back because
Yeah.
they love it here, but they're going to tell you about it every time. And I love that about this community.
That's right. It's 1 minute after 1, so we want to bring this to a close. There's a question from Shala John here about audience survey, and we can always come to that later at some point. I don't want to take much of your time, but I want to say thank you so much for taking the opportunity to speak with us today. For us as a center, we feel we're a gathering place for us to be able to connect, with the ecosystem in multiple and several ways, whether it's locally, nationally, and internationally, and we work across those multiple levels. And we sincerely, for me personally, I see the work that you're doing. I dove my cap, as we say in my culture, to the amazing, remarkable work that you're doing in our community. With that, we want to bring this to a close. Thank you so much. Frost is still ongoing in Regina for those that are going to be seeing this video later. Please catch it before it come to an end. And then I know that Breanne, you did also mention a show that is. You have a show going on right now? I
Yeah,
think so.
we
Yes.
have our first performance on March 11th. So 11th to 22nd is Rubaboo, a Métis cabaret in partnership with Gordon Tatusis and the Ganawin Theatre, and then is heading to Manitoba, to Winnipeg the following month
Okay.
at Royal Manitoba Theatre Center.
Great. Well, thank you so much for being part of our series. And then I'm also hoping that we can reach out to some theater and other theater to bring you also, because I think that the work that all the various aspects of the ecosystem is doing is important, and it has to be complementary. So with that, we want to bring this to a close. Thank you so much. And then we look forward to seeing you in the next edition next month.
Thank you everyone for coming.
Thank you
everyone
for coming.
and spending your time with us.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you so much.
Yeah,
Thank
it's
you
a
so
real honor to take up people's time. So thank you.
All right.
Okay.
You have been listening to Global Voices, the official podcast of the Center for Socially Engaged Theatre at the University of Regina. For more details about the center, visit www.cset.ca.